Hello viewers, welcome once again to our ongoing series on Mendelian genetics and beyond. In this series, if you remember, I had already talked to you in my previous two lectures regarding the fascinating aspects of quantitative genetics, which we had also called as the polygenes. Now, at the end of our second lecture, I had promised you that we would like to fortify our discussion with the help of certain numericals. But then, before we go to the numericals, there are a few points which need to be recapitulated. What we had discussed on the last turn was a series of examples regarding polygenic inheritance, the pattern of the existence of variable number of phenotypes, how the phenotypes were imperceptibly blending into one another so as to reach a confusing situation as far as the genotypes and the phenotypes were concerned, because they were not conforming to any type of a Mendelian pattern. Now, this was a case of continuous variation. I had also discussed with you examples of human height, skin pigmentation color in human beings, our eye color, and of course the classical experiments of the corolla length in Nicotiana tibacum as well as the kernel color of wheat. There are in fact a whole lot of other examples that we have, but then today we would like to focus ourselves on more of the mathematical side of this aspect. The rationale for quantitative inheritance, as we have discussed in the past also, needs to be summarized once again. Actually, these characteristics should not be described only on the basis of merely qualitative characters. They need to be quantified. That means they need to be measured, they need to be counted or even weighed. For example, if you are going to talk about tomatoes, then you don't always talk about their color. You have to talk about their size and weight. And when you talk about their weight, then you need to weigh them, or you have to measure the size, or if you wish to quantify the productivity, then you have to count. So that means these entities are actually measurable because they are quantified. So we would find that not one gene is going to influence the phenotype, but then the product comes in the form of an additive product of two or more genes. Now, these particular two genes are also going to be located at different loci, different places on the genome. That is why we call them as polygenes. Each of the locus may be occupied by two different types or two alternatives of the alleles. Either it could be additive. Now, if it is additive, then it would have a significant role as far as the manifestation of the phenotype is concerned. And if it is non-additive, that means it is a null gene, it is present, but it is not adding anything to the phenotype of an individual. In any case, the total effect of each of these alleles on the phenotype would be roughly equal. That is, you take for example a capital A or a capital B, it would be the number. So that means we always tend to lay emphasis on the idea that it is not the which gene is present, it is how many of them are present. That seems to be the basis of a continuous type of variation, unlike the normal discontinuous variation which we call as the Mendelian principle. So that means a substantial variation of the phenotype is going to be a cumulative effect of many genes, but the character would be a single one. One very important aspect we should never forget: whenever we are going to quantify the polygenic traits, naturally it cannot be done on the basis of a few replicates. What we would therefore require, or a geneticist would require, would be a fairly large number of progeny. Because if there are a large number of progeny of a population, then you can apply various statistical principles like the mean, mode and median. We would come to that maybe in our next lecture, and that means all these statistical tools of biometry are going to be important to quantify and reach a tangible conclusion. So that means with this whole idea, let's go back to our earlier ideas of the cross between a white person and a black individual. Their marriage resulted in the production of mulattoes. Now, if you remember from your earlier ideas, as you can see on your screens, we have here the two parents that are having 3 pair of alleles. So in this case, the mulatto has what is called as a triple heterozygotic configuration. That means capital A small a, capital B small c and capital C small c. We should always look as how many contributing alleles they are existing in the system. Now in this case, we had given a broad idea that the number of genes would follow a type of a bell-shaped graph, wherein the ratio would be 1, 6, 15, 20, then again 15 and 6 and 1. And the number of dominant genes, in this case we call it as the contributing genes, would now come from 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and finally none. So that means we have two extremes, where we have either all the 6, the contributing ones, and on the other extreme we have all the 6 which are non-contributing, and the apex or the top of this graph would be having 3 genes. So this also gives us an idea. If we talk more graphically, we find that the two extremes would be having a pure homozygote, let us say, or the 6 contributing alleles, and on the other, which has been shown to you in white, will be all of them are having the dominant ones, and on the left hand side we have different ones. So that means there is some relationship between the parental and the F2 configuration. So that means this entire, which we always call as the bell shaped curve, in quantitative genetics is a normal distribution, where the largest number of individuals are there in the intermediate range and the fewer at each of the extremes. Whenever we say, okay, we are bothered about how many genes, so that means let us take some mathematical parameters into consideration before we are actually ready for a simple numerical. So that means the first part of our discussion now would entail the determination of gene numbers for a polygenic characteristic. That means how do we ascertain that how many genes are involved in a cross, and it is resulting. So what type of a checkerboard should we make? Should we make 2 into 2 as 4, or 4 is to 4 is to 16, or 8 into 8 as 64, and so on. So here we would find that the proportion of F2 individuals which resemble one of the original parents, say suppose we are talking about the black and the white parents. So that means the F2 individuals who were born from the mulatto parents, they should resemble the original parents. In this case now it will be the grandparents. So how many are going to resemble their grandparents, that is the parental generation, is going to be a very useful parameter which would help us to estimate the number of genes which are affecting a particular polygenic trait. Let us take some concrete example on your screens. When two individuals are homozygous for different alleles at a single locus, So that means, mind you, it is a single locus. So we have A1 and we are crossing it with A2. So the contribution of each of the parent can be just one of them, either A1 or A2. So that means the resulting F1, if you interbreed them, you will find that 1/4 of the F2 generation would be homozygous. Either it would be A1 or it would be A2. So that means, as I said, like the grandparents or the parental generation. So that means, if we are talking about both the extremes, it is 1/4. So 1/4 to the power n is taken as the useful hint. That means the number of individuals in the F2 progeny which will resemble each of their original homozygous parents. I repeat, homozygous parents. So that means n here represents the number of loci which a segregating pair of alleles is going to affect a particular characteristic. If we look at this figure a little more carefully, we would find that the 1/4 is on one extreme and the other 1/4 happens to be on the other extreme. So that means the two different alleles are at two different loci, then we should, how many of the progeny are going to resemble the parent one? Of course, 1/4 into 1/4, because there are two loci here, and therefore the product happens to be 1/16. So that means 1/16 of the parents are going to of the progeny are going to resemble their parents. So this is an equation which actually is providing us with a really possibility of determining the number of loci also of a particular quantitative characteristic. So on the two extremes we saw that the value of n could be ascertained by taking 1/4 in the middle. So that means 1/4 to the power n is actually the ratio of the F2 individuals with extreme phenotypes. I repeat, what do we mean by extreme phenotypes? If we were taking a red and a white parent to begin with, so 1/16 of the progeny are either red or they are white. That's the basic idea. So talking of maths now, 1/4 into 1/4, that is 1/16, which happens to be 1/4 to the power 2. So here the value of n is going to be 2. So that means if there are two loci, the value is going to be 2, and we have 1/16. So that means here the checkerboard is going to be of a like a dihybrid, right? So we have a 16. Likewise, if you get a situation where we find that 1/64 are actually representing either of the two extremes. So then how do we divide it? 1/64 in this case would be equivalent to 1/4 to the power 3. So that means here the value of n is equal to 3. And now in this case the checkerboard has to be, or the Punnett square, whatever you may call it, has to be in the form of 8 into 8. So naturally we are talking about 3 different pair of genes which are there. There is another very interesting parameter with which we can actually talk about the phenotypic classes. Let me remind you, in our first lecture when we were talking about the terminology of Mendelian genetics, I had talked to you about, I had mentioned about phenotypic classes and genotypic classes, and then we had made a conclusion that the number of phenotypic classes is going to be different in a monohybrid cross, and there has to be a formula for that, and the number of phenotypic classes would be different from that of the genotypic classes. Let's have an appraisal of what we had said earlier. That means in a monohybrid cross you had red and white, isn't it? However, so that means only 2 types of phenotypic classes, but the genotypic classes were 1:2:1, that is 3. So that means now we are taking n to the power 2 or then 3 to the power n, and calculating accordingly for the subsequent dihybrid, trihybrid, tetrahybrid, and so on. Now, here we follow another type of equation for finding out the phenotypic classes, because this is not qualitative genetics, this is quantitative genetics. Now, in this case what we find is that we have an equation 2n plus 1, which means number of phenotypes or the phenotypic categories which are to be observed. For example, if there are two polygenes which are involved in a particular system, as we saw in the first example a little while back, we find that n is equal to 2. So, then putting it in equation, what would be the number of phenotypes? 2n plus 1. And this is what exactly happens, because the number of phenotypic classes is 5. You remember 1, 4, 6, 4, 1 is a typical bell shaped pattern, where the additive alleles are 4, then 3, then 2 and 1, and on the other extreme none. So, all on the other extreme, when there is none, that means all of them are null alleles, and whereas on the first corner or the first beginning, we have all the 4 which are the contributing alleles. So, that means this 2n plus 1 formula is pretty effective in hurriedly finding out or quickly finding out the number of phenotypes. For example, like in kernel color of wheat, or the example that we have been following throughout, that is the skin color in human beings, if there are 3 polygenes which are involved. So, in this case now n will be equal to 3, and which would mean 2n plus 1, that is 6 plus 1 is equal to 7 phenotypic classes. Mind you, all these 7 classes will show gradations. That is why I use the phrase in the beginning that they are almost imperceptibly merging with the phenotypes, and therefore it is quite difficult for us to really segregate them. And each of these phenotypes, the 7 that I am talking about, would be having again, as I showed you in the first diagram today, that is 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and none of these additive alleles. So, with this formula we could even now go to explaining the kernel color of wheat. As you can see on your screens, on one of the fringes you would find 1 by 6 of white, 1 by 64 of white, and on the other extreme you would see again 1 by 64 of the red ones. And this cross really signifies that the one in the middle has 3 contributing alleles and 3 non-contributing ones. So, that means you could also resort to explaining this whole idea with the help of a binomial expansion also. Because if we have to look at the distribution of phenotypes, a binomial expansion also has a very important role. You remember, Mendel had a good idea of binomial expansion, and that is how he was able to get the finally result, which could later be interpreted as 1:2:1. So, if you look at the initial equations on your screen as a plus b, now n happens to be 1. So, you take the squares a plus b, which is the normal equation that a child is introduced to when an algebraic expansion is introduced. Then a plus b to the power 3 and a plus b to the power 4 has the expansions. So, that means if n is the number of the contributing dominant alleles. In this case, we are going to take always the contributing alleles, because they are the ones that matter. So, how can you explain now the ratio which will be obtained? You simply expand the binomial equation. So, instead of a and b, we put a half and half. That means half plus half to the power n. So, if we have n, that means if it was 2, half plus half to the power 2, then it becomes 1, 4, 6, 5, 4, 1, which is a typical dihybrid cross checkerboard. In case 3 genes are involved, so it will be 1 by 2 plus 1 by 2 to the power 3, and we will now get 1, 6, 15, 20, 15, 6, 1. So, either way you could reach the same conclusion. So, that means if there are 2 pairs of multiple genes, then n happens to be 4, or in case of 3 it happens to be 6. Now, this is going to be very cumbersome, because the expanding n is equal to 6 is going to be a very lengthy story. So, why not take the help of another expression which is called as the Pascal's triangle. So, this Pascal triangle is going to very hurriedly and easily give us the number of phenotypes. As you can see on your screens, the expansion has been given for 1 by 2 plus 1 by 2 to the power n, and you take various values of n, and you can now go from 2, 4 and 6 and so on. And this Pascal's triangle is going to also tell you what is the number of phenotypes which can be produced, and of course the bell-shaped graph figures. So, just to summarize the whole idea, the phenotypic classes and the percentage of the F2 progeny that are going to resemble their original parents has been correlated here. If there are 1 by 4, then obviously we are talking about the number of phenotypic classes as 3, and going to say if it was the figure was 1 by 256, then obviously we are talking about the number of phenotypes as 9. So, that means if you know the number of phenotypes, the number of involved polygenes can be fairly easily worked out by putting the values in these formulae. So, if you look at the Punnett square, which is now showing that you have to now ascertain what is it showing. The first thing that you should look for is how many squares. Well, it seems to be 64. So, immediately it would come to your mind, okay, 64 means how much? That is, what would be the value of n? Now, the value of n happens to be now 3 in this case. So, that means 3 allelic pairs are going to be involved in this, and you can find a gradation of 1, 4, 16, 20, 16, 6 and 1 in this whole case. I think now, by now we are fully armed to now venture into solving some of the very simple numericals. But then even before doing that, you should again summarize that in quantitative genetics, when you mean A, it is always equivalent to B or C. So, that means it does not matter which one, it matters how many, because you take 2A or you take 2Bs or you take 1AB or 2Cs, then it is the same. So, that means on your screen you can see various permutations and combinations. That means this is a case of additive alleles. We are not bothered which ones, we are only bothered how many of them can be achieved into an individual with the help of the gametes of the parents. So, that means one thing again you should remember, that in polygenic inheritance, alone capital A is going to be incompletely dominant over B. So, that means if you are going to have what I always say, imperceptible merging of phenotypes, there has to be a regular gradation, and this is exactly what we see in case of polygenic inheritance. Friends, let us now wait for our next lecture to solve some of the simple numericals of polygenic inheritance. Thank you.